Good morning, all. Week 23, 22 for this COVID madness, the lockdown, whatever people are calling it these days. However, there is something good about it. There's something positive about everything. I'm able to meet a lot of interesting people and actually launch this series that's on now, Visionaries and Truthtellers. It's a series I've been wanting to launch for a decade. And being locked in the house, I was like, well, this is as good a time to start as any. So my next guest is he's going to be with us an hour, 2 hours, 6 hours. I don't know. We're going to talk about his book, his teaching, a bunch of other stuff. He and I did an interview, maybe back in March, February,
Maybe
March.
like February, around
Okay,
February. Yeah.
okay. And we polished it, cleaned it up, put it on my site. It went live in April. And I've been trying to figure out when I could get back to him. And today we have finally made it happen. The magic of Twitter and social media, it does work. It can be productive. It can be positive. I get to meet people like this, which is a big thing for me. We're going to talk about his great book today, From an Action, In Action to In Action.
Yes.
Make sure our goal is to get this on the bestsellers list, people. So New York Times bestsellers, let's go out and get you 1,000 copies and make anybody's got anything to do with children, make sure they read this.
There you
Okay,
go.
so I have yapped long enough. That was a long introduction. But so let's get started, Mr. Kwame. Welcome to Visionaries and Truth Tellers. Tell the folks 30-second bio about yourself.
Well, I'm Kwame Sarfo Mensah. I'm an educator by trade, but I'm also a father, husband, entrepreneur, among many things. And I just want to help people enhance themselves in any way I can. So
Okay.
I think that's good enough in 30 seconds.
Okay. Okay, what are you currently working on?
So right now, I'm currently focusing on my consulting business, Identity Talk Consulting,
Mhm.
and it's a educational consulting firm that specializes in providing professional development services for K to 12 school districts, educators,
Mhm.
colleges and universities with teacher pipeline programs, as well as education nonprofit platforms. So I've been
Okay.
focusing on, building that and providing services through my firm.
Okay. Well, usually I have a format, a bunch of questions. I'm throwing all of that out the window because, as I said a couple of minutes ago, my goal yesterday was to complete this, to start and finish it. I've had it for a little while. I
Yeah,
did complete it. I started and finished it yesterday. I was at a vegan spot picking up food. I was waiting in line, social distancing. I was reading it. I had to do some
nice.
other running around. I had it in the car. I was reading it. So I did get it done. I actually want to spend a lot of time talking about this and kind of jump right in. So
Sure.
I took a bunch of notes all over the book. So the first thing we want to talk about is I really want you to talk about something that I haven't heard before, but I kind of think I knew it intuitively, which is can you talk to me a little bit about teaching as emotional labor? That just hit me. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Teaching is emotional labor. So when you become a teacher, when you do any type of work with children, there's an emotional attachment in the sense that you do it because you want the children to have a better life for themselves than you had.
Hmm.
And in order for you to accomplish that goal, it takes a lot of emotional investment.
Hmm.
You have to care about the children, and it's labor in the sense that it's work because you're giving so much of yourself into this work that sometimes it's at your own expense because you get so invested, you care about the kids so much. Think about educators in general.
Hmm.
A lot of them spend 15, 20, 25 years doing this work. And it's not because they are happy with their pay. It's not because they don't see the injustices that take place within the system and how they're mistreated. It's because they are invested in the children. That's what brought them into the field in the first place. And some people overstay their welcome because they feel like if I leave my these children, they're not going to be better off. I have a responsibility to them. So that's where there's an emotional tug and pull because you know that it's not healthy for you at this very time, but you also don't want to leave the kids behind. You don't want to feel that,
Hmm.
you don't want them to feel that sense of abandonment.
Right.
So that's why I call it emotional labor, because it does tug and pull into your emotions.
Okay. And I definitely want to swing back around maybe towards the end of this discussion and talk about you had a good chunk in your book about um, I want to say boundaries and self-care, right?
Yes,
And being able to take care of yourself so that you are not running on empty. You know, I'm running on, I call it running on fumes.
yes.
Well, it's like you really got nothing left and you're kind of like recycling stuff. And it's kind of like, well, no, this is, you got nothing left. You got to refuel. So I definitely want to talk about that.
Mhm.
So that's great. I've never heard of teaching referred to as emotional labor. And I know that it is. And I know that I think a lot of us we don't refer to it as that because you know I've heard people refer to it as a labor of love, right?
Which
And
it
it's
is.
kind yes, and it's kind of like you know you have to have the patience of a saint and all this other kind of business. But in terms of emotional labor, I don't think many of us have heard that, and definitely. I don't think people talk about that while people are in teaching training program. Like this is gonna take a lot out of you. So like I don't know what you think you're getting into, but this is going to take everything out of you and then some. So you have to constantly refuel. So I'm glad you said. So I definitely want to cover that and make sure that people know that. Let's talk a little bit about No Child Left Behind because that was another
Ooh.
something that you mentioned. Because that was once again that was something I've been hearing and didn't really understand how it worked, why we had it, was it needed, is it not needed, was it a bad idea from the beginning? So talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So for those who are in education, No Child Left Behind has been around for a long time,
Mhm,
but it's gone through many iterations. So if you go back to the Lyndon B. Johnson administration in the
mhm,
60s,
mhm,
it was under a different name, which is not coming to me right now. But over the course of 40 years, and then we get into the Bush administration, second Bush administration in the early 2000s, that iteration became No Child Left Behind.
mhm.
And what it basically is a it's a piece of legislation that allows for school districts, educators to be accountable for the academic growth of students. And there are certain guidelines that are in place. So for one, through No Child Left Behind, you have a lot of standardized testing that's taking place. Um, you also have teachers having to take licensure tests in order to be
Mhm.
considered highly qualified teachers. So, in order for you to get your certification, you have to pass a series of tests, and it's different for every state in our country.
Okay.
Um, but then also, we have what we call even special ed laws too.
Mhm.
So, we have certain students who get accommodations, they get support from their schools or communities, and they may not always reach their educational goals by the end of the year. And usually, when that happens, those students end up staying back or being retained. But with No Child Left Behind, the whole idea is we're not leaving any child behind. So instead of retaining them, we're going to have them pass along into the next grade. But we're also going to have some accommodations that will help to mitigate the learning loss
Okay.
and not have them further behind from their other counterparts who are either on grade level or above that. But but the issue is, and theoretically, that's the whole point of No Child Left Behind is to have school accountability. So if
Mhm.
kids are failing, okay, schools need to find a way to address those situations. But on the flip side, if you're just passing kids along and they haven't met the grade level requirements for that year, that's also widening the gap because now
Mhm.
they're going to get harder work than the year before,
Hmm.
because everything's incremental. Everything builds upon
Right.
each other, right? Especially in
Hmm.
subjects such as reading and
Math.
math.
Hmm.
If you don't know the foundational concepts, if you don't have the basics down,
Hmm.
as you go further along in your K-12 journey, it's going to be even more difficult for you to grasp the more complex concepts. And so that's how the gap widens year after year. So maybe when they're in third grade, it's like this,
Hmm.
fourth grade, fifth grade, sixth grade, seventh, all the way
Hmm.
through to 12th. Now you have what we call what we've been hearing for so many years, an achievement gap, where you have our students of color, particularly Black and Latinx students down here, and then our white counterparts are up here.
Hmm.
And and so I think with No Child Left Behind, it really did more harm than good, in my opinion, because you had some quality teachers who are great at what they do, but they just can't pass tests. And because they can't pass the test, they don't get the certification, or they end up losing their jobs, because in order for you to keep your license, you have to continue to take these tests in
Right.
order to get an additional cert, in order to maintain a cert, right? But then you also have teachers who are great at testing, probably ace their test, but
But
they
bad
only last
teachers.
but they only last maybe 2-3 months in the classroom.
Right.
So do the tests. So what does that say about using the test as a measuring stick
Mhm.
for teacher performance?
So I want to jump in because
What is
my
that?
brain is going 1,000 miles an hour now. So I want to make
Sure.
sure that I have this straight because this sounds a little wacky to me and it sounds kind of crazy.
Hmm.
So the teachers have to pass a test in order to be able to teach, but the students, the young people, can get moved along without necessarily quote unquote passing a test or knowing or having certain knowledge.
Yeah. So
Oh, okay. Do
essentially,
you see how that's
no. That's what's backwards about it. Because
right?
just think about it, and I have so many stories, not enough to
Mhm.
talk about today. But with these standardized tests, first and foremost, they weren't designed for the students.
Mhm.
The tests were designed more so for the adults, the teachers, the school districts, in order for them to get data points that they can use to convey to other people,
Mhm.
right? Because just think about it. If I go to a job interview and they're looking at my resume and my transcript and everything, they're not going to inquire about my test scores. They
Right.
don't care about my SATs. They don't care about my state test scores from my K to
Mhm.
12 years. All they care about is whether or not I can do the job.
Mhm.
So, which is why when we talk about the excess of standardized testing, and I know California, they've talked about it quite a bit and they've done a lot of work to try to minimize it. So I do want to give credit where credit is due. But in a lot of other states, that's not the case. If anything, they've increased it. You know,
Okay.
um, but just getting back to like teachers having to pass the test, I think that's just been part of the problem, because a lot of great teachers have either lost a job or haven't been able to get access to a job because of the fact that they're not the best test takers. And that part is totally unfair, and that's what
Mhm.
causes some of the inequities that exist within our education system.
Okay. And then it's my belief that a lot of times, and you and I both work with young people,
Yes.
and I make sure I tell my young people all the time. Many times, people are making decisions for you about you that affect your life, and they have there's no connection to it, right? So you've got somebody making decisions about what this should look like or what it looks like when you're performing well, and they're not in it, right? So I mean,
Hmm.
there are people making passing laws and deciding what kind of test you should have, or whatever, but they're not in it, Right. So I've always found that interesting, and I tell my young people all the time, you can't wait for, don't get into this trick bag of, oh, the government's going to help me, or um, you know, uh, I'm gonna get on, what is it, Social Security. I'm gonna get all these government programs, and I said, well, that they can cut those at any minute, and the people that are deciding whether or not they get cut are not affected by them. So you don't want to put yourself in that position. So yeah, I agree, and I agree that I think there's a lot of really great teachers and great teaching going on, but if it doesn't come in this certain box, people don't know what to do with it, right? Like I've had people ask me for years, well, do you have a teaching credential? Do you have a PhD? I'm like, no, I just jumped in and started doing it, and I figured out what worked and what didn't work. And I'm always growing and learning and changing. And I can, um, a lot of stuff I do is intuitive, a lot of it's training, but you kind of figure it out. And it's kind of like, oh, if you got this credential and you got this PhD, you could do this over here. And I was like, I don't know if I want to do that. That's a whole other conversation.
Hmm.
So we cleared up No Child Left Behind in 3 minutes. I like it. Let's talk about something else that really struck me that I spend probably more than 100% of my day in, because it's my day job, is working career pathway programs.
Mm.
So I want to talk about that because when I saw that really, I saw that, yeah, I was like, oh my God, because that's what I do. That's my job. I work with
Yep.
young people and I teach a lot of life skills, a lot of financial literacy skills, a lot of self-management skills. How do you get a job? How do you keep it when you get it? What do you do if you don't get along with people on the job, or your boss or whatever? And so there's a lot of, um, I spent a lot of my day doing that. And something I found out years ago, I was doing a training, this is a couple of years ago, and this guy was training people about working in career pathways. And he talked about some of the challenges and struggles those of us who do the work have with, like, we just can't understand, why can't you just go to work? Like, why is it a production? Just get up like all the rest of us, take a shower, go to work, come home. And he pointed out, he said he did a quick survey. He read the room and he asked us, how many of you, by the time you were 18, 19, or 20, had had at least one job? So everybody's hand went up. The old people like me. Well, all of us, all of us started working at 14, or some of us started working younger than that. And he talked about when you start working at 14 or 15, by the time you're 20, there's some things, if you've never had a job ever, then there's things you can't really expect people to do certain things and behave a certain way because they don't know. They've never done it. A lot of the folks they're around haven't done it. So talk to me about career pathways programs and your thinking on that, and your thinking on obtaining, like, oh, they used to call it vocational skills
Hmm.
when I was growing up. I don't know what they call them now, but I think they call them,
Right.
there's another name for it now. But so talk a little bit about career pathways programs.
Yeah, I think now they call it career technical education,
Yep.
CTE
Yeah.
programs, right?
Hmm.
So my thinking about it, and it kind of ties into some of the other chapters in the book. So when I talk about overage undercredited students, for
Hmm.
instance, the reason why we have so many overage undercredited students is not just because of the fact that they're being passed along, right?
Hmm.
Or the fact that they're not being diagnosed for learning disabilities in order to get special education services early on in their K-12 journey. Part of it just because of the fact that school is just not engaging to them. They find it boring. It doesn't pique their interest. And it kind of ties back to the problem with education today, and that's the fact that we spend so much time on testing. School districts pretty much spend so much money on standardized test programs and assessment tools, and not enough money on figuring out, okay, what can we do to get our kids prepared for the 21st century? You know,
Hmm.
and that's always been an issue I've had. Even when I was in the classroom, I had this issue. I just felt like there were kids in front of me who were smart as a whistle, highly intelligent, but because they didn't have the best relationship with school, or they felt like, hmm, I don't really rock with school like that.
Mm-hmm.
They just decided not to do work. And they
Mm-hmm.
go an entire year without doing work. And because maybe they've already stayed back once, they can't stay back again. So they automatically have to be passed on, which is what we call social promotion,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you have kids who understand that. They understand that they can't be kept back again. And as a result, they are exploiting the system
Mm-hmm.
by saying, okay, we're not going to, we're not going to do any work. I've already stayed back, so it doesn't matter what I do. I'm still going to go on to the next grade, which is very true.
Mm-hmm.
So now, as a teacher, the challenge is how do you get them to intrinsically do the work because it's going to benefit them in the future? That's the angle you have to take with them because you can't just say, yeah, if you don't stay back, if you don't do the work, you're going to stay back. Maybe 20 years ago when I was in elementary school, 20, 25 years ago, I could say that. But now I feel like kids have so much power and
Mm-hmm.
they know so much about the way the system works that they can use it to their advantage. Like I've had kids who didn't do a lick of work for me all year long, and it wasn't because they hated me as a teacher. If anything, they loved me, and they would tell me, no offense, Mr. Sarfo Mensah, I'm not trying to do this work. I don't intend on doing this work, and I already know that you're gonna have to pass me either way.
Mm-hmm.
And they say it very matter of factly,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'm just like, okay, well, you know what? I'm not gonna sit here and BS you. You're right. Like,
Yeah.
but what I'm hoping for is that wherever you decide to do in your life, that you're able to take some life lessons
Mm-hmm.
that will help you to make the best decisions for you professionally, but also
Mm-hmm.
personally.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all I can do in my position because I know there's some kids who are not going to go to college,
Right.
right? And this
Mm-hmm.
goes back to the idea of career pathways. Some kids aren't built for college. That's just not the path for them, and that's totally okay. Maybe their path is an apprentice program or
Mm-hmm.
trade school or even an associate's degree at a community college.
Right.
Maybe that's their path. That's their ceiling. And that's all right. Not everybody is built to go through a 4 year,
Mm-hmm.
undergraduate program or even going higher, like to get a master's or a
Mm-hmm.
doctorate, right? Even in my situation, I went through the process because I came from a family where both my parents are West African. Education is a high priority, in our culture.
Mm-hmm.
They're both from Ghana, right? So all we knew was college. So by
Mm-hmm.
the time we got to high school and we all graduated, my siblings and I, we knew that we were going to go to college without understanding that there were other alternative paths we can take.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't know at the time that there was such a thing as an apprentice program. We didn't know that there was such a thing as a community college. We didn't realize that there are certain students who opted not to go to college, but instead high school. But instead, not high school, but instead maybe go right into the workforce because they
Mm-hmm.
had to put food on the table for their family and help pay bills for mom and dad. Like we didn't understand those things. All we knew was, okay, after high school, you go to college, and we thought that this was commonplace. But then, as you get older and you start to realize how classism works, how socioeconomics works, you realize that's not the case for every person. And even for someone like myself, who is black and who comes from a two-parent household, which is rare in our community, sadly, um, I didn't realize that I was a rarity
Mm-hmm.
in the sense that I had two college educated parents and all my siblings went through the college system and went on to get degrees.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't happen in every black family.
Right.
But at 17, 18, you don't recognize that right away.
Yeah, I think, and I think a lot of it is what you see, right? Like
Right.
one of the things like I said, I work in a CTE program, and one of the things, and there's a construction program. And one of the things I work with my young people in the program is trying to expose them to different things. To say, okay, here's an option, here's something you could do here. Not overwhelm people, but just let them know, okay, if you don't want to go to college, like in our program, that's one of the outcomes, but it's one of four, right? So it's like you can do that, or maybe you, like you said, maybe you want to do, like I know here a thing that I had never even heard of until I started doing this program was underwater welding. Like I don't know, you could go underwater, you could go in the ocean and weld things. And they were like, yeah. And then I went to this, I was taking some kids on a field trip, some young people on a field trip, and they started talking about this program and going underwater. I was like, going underwater? And they said, yeah, you can go in the ocean and, you may have, something may have broken and you're welding and thinking underwater. So,
Mm.
yeah, there's a whole lot of things that are in the world and the planet. And if you don't know about them, or if your circle is like that big, like everybody, if everybody is doing the same thing. And one of the
Right.
things I try to encourage my young folks is broaden your circle, unless you want to do the same thing. Now, if what you want is this, then by all means keep doing that. But one
Right.
of the things that I really push is like, okay, well, like last week we had a networking event where I brought in 6 different people. We were on a Zoom call, 6 different people from 6 different industries, 6 different perspectives on what it looks like, what the world looks like, and how do you make it, whatever. And it was an opportunity for them to, and I told them I had an objective. I had it in the as a part of the slide presentation. I said, one is 2 objectives. It's for them to meet new talent, which is you, all of you. And the second objective is for you to do some career exploration and broaden your network circle by meeting some people you don't know. And so we accomplished that. And one of the things I was telling them, I said, the people that can help you, you haven't even met them yet, right? They're out there, and you just got to keep going and you'll meet them. So yeah, the Career Pathways program, like I said, I saw that, I was super excited. I was like, oh my God, this is what I do all day, every day. And I've done it in the culinary arts when I worked at a community college. I've done it when I worked with the homeless population, with my folks that were, living in the streets and under bridges in their cars. So I've been doing career pathways for almost at this point, almost a decade solid.
Right.
So I'm glad. So once again, I'm glad I have a term for it. We'll come back. We will continue this talk about that at a later point. Killer Mike. Killer Mike in
Yeah.
Triggered. Okay. So first of all, let me just say this. Okay, I'm reading your book, and well, let me say a couple of things. Reading your book, we met before,
Yes.
and I think we were both kind of like, "Oh, what's with this guy? I don't know." And then we kind of, warmed up. And then reading your book, one of the things it did for me was that it made me feel a little less alone in the world, right? And I'm reading it and I'm thinking, oh, here's somebody who has a different background, who's come to some of the same conclusions, but from a different angle, right? From literally a different part of the planet, right? And
Yeah.
who's 20, how old are you, 24, 25?
Oh man. Oh man. I wish. That's a compliment. I'm actually 37.
Okay, well, I'm 15 years older than you.
There
So it
you
was
go.
interesting. So it was interesting to see somebody who's, I guess, generation and a half, however that goes, behind me, who's
Right.
approaching things and thinking about things very deeply and in ways that I think about it. So it's like, oh, okay. And so it really made me feel a little less alone in the world. And I also wanted to say, I'm reading this and I thought, the name of the chapter I think was Mike Check or something like that.
Mic check 1 2 1 2.
Right. And I thought, okay, and I'm thinking, and because I'm old, I'm thinking about the 80s,
Well, yeah.
with Salt and Pepper and all those people. I'm thinking, Mike, I'm like, okay. And then I started reading the first page and I'm like, oh, he's talking about Killer Mike. And what's interesting about that is I've only bought in my life, I think I've only bought, I'm telling my age, I've only bought 3 rap CDs, right?
Okay.
One was a Jay-Z CD from 100 years ago, live, and he was doing an unplugged thing. The
Uh
second
huh.
one was a Nas CD because I used to love Nas. No, I'm talking about 4. The third one was a Tupac CD,
Gotcha.
and the fourth one was Run the Jewels, Killer Mike.
Wow.
Now, yes, I've only so in 52 years now, and Run the Jewels, I found out about them through when they were promoting Black Panther. Because I heard a clip of one of the songs, and
Right.
just that 10 seconds, I was like, "Who is that?" So I went and I Googled and I found out. I was like, "Oh, this this is the name of the group, and I ordered the CD, got it. I was playing it in my car for probably 2 years, right? And so I knew who Killer Mike was. I knew, when his show came out on Netflix, I thought, oh, I don't know. I don't know if I want to. I'll put that one in the queue and I'll kind of get to it when I get to it. But then reading your take on it and reading your, I want this to stay G-rated so I get this to other educators. So I won't
Yeah.
say what the name of the second episode was,
No,
but it was,
we're gonna
yeah,
censor.
it was. I'll make it easier on my editor. It was Blank School, right?
There you go. There you go.
So, but reading that, and I thought this is really interesting. And then this morning I got up, and since I get up at about 4 or 5, I got up this morning with the goal of watching that before. Okay, at 50, okay, no problem. I got up with the goal of watching that this morning before I talked to you. So I did watch that episode and thought it was I was like, okay, this is interesting. This is very fascinating. So talk to me a little bit about that, about connect all that for me, connect all that for everybody. Killer Mike,
So,
triggered, teaching, all that. Go.
well, first and foremost, I'm a hip hop head. So I've been
Okay.
listening to hip hop since I was 5, 6 years old. And I have an older brother who's 5 years my senior.
Hmm.
So man, we grew up listening to native tongue. We grew up listening to groups like De La Soul, Tribe Called Quest. We grew up listening to the Run DMC's,
Hmm.
KRS One, Boogie Down Production. So this is a part of who we are.
Okay.
And even in the way that I go about my work in the classroom, there's a swag to it that's very hip hop.
Hmm.
But as far as how I came across Killer Mike, I've known Killer Mike for a minute because I'm an Outkast fan. So Killer Mike's from Atlanta, just like Outkast from Atlanta.
Okay.
And anybody who knows a little bit about the history of hip hop in Atlanta, particularly with Outkast, they come from this collective called the Dungeon Family.
I remember that. Yeah, I
So
read
that
about that.
consists of Goody Mob, where you have
Hmm. Hmm.
CeeLo Green, who now is who he is now, but back then he was part of this group called Goody Mob, and he was rapping and
Hmm.
singing. See, people forget that he started out as a rapper, CeeLo. But anyway, Killer Mike was part of that collective in the late '90s, early 2000s. So it's amazing how now you fast forward almost 20 years later, he's this political activist. But the man, he went to Morehouse.
Okay.
He went to HBCU, so
Hmm.
he's very highly educated, always has been socially conscious.
Okay.
And so when he came out with Trigger Warning on Netflix, his show, I said, "Oh, it's Killer Mike. I'm gonna check it out because Killer Mike is somebody who's always been about social political action and getting people in the black community more socially and politically involved in the process."
Hmm.
And he has this interview called F School. And of course, as a teacher, I'm thinking, this is interesting. Let me watch it. And without giving too much away, he pretty much goes on to talk about how kids are going to school now to be compliant,
Hmm.
and school doesn't really engage kids in a way that allows them
To think.
to think and
Hmm.
to think critically, but also to be prepared for future careers.
Hmm.
That was really his argument. So he decided, okay, we need to find a medium. Is there a medium out there that will engage students to think critically and to retain the knowledge that will be transferable to their future careers, right?
Hmm.
So he decides to use a medium of jokingly, but making a point. He decided to use a medium of pornography because sex sells. So he figured if we are able to marry CTE, career technical education, with pornography, that's going to keep students engaged,
Hmm.
and then that's going to have them more motivated to do these future careers. So the way he goes about it is he pretty much takes like a sample size, right? A sample group of folks,
Hmm.
maybe like 15, 20 folks, gives them a test about carpentry. They take the test, all of them fail it. So then he says, well, gee, you guys are so smart though. And these are people from different racial backgrounds, different demographics, pretty much hitting the spectrum. He said, what's it going to take for you guys to retain this knowledge? How can we get you all to be more prepared for these careers and to retain this knowledge? And then they were saying, if it's presented in a way that's going to engage me, I'll be able to retain it more. But if it's boring, I'm not going to retain it. And that goes back to what kids say. You know, we hear the terms such as culturally responsive education. That's essentially what it is. It's just finding ways to tap into the inventory of students and engaging them in a way that's going to tap into whatever their personal interests and skills are, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Killer Mike said, okay. I mean, think about the misogyny that's in hip hop and other genres and just in general. Like it sells. Sex still sells in this country.
Mm-hmm.
So if we take that and we marry it with what we're trying to do with career and technical education, then it's like, okay, we can get some kids engaged. Hopefully for the right reasons. So he does that. They watch these videos, which he pretty much created, right, with his team. And then they take the same test again after watching the videos, and everybody aced the test. So that's how he was able.
I saw that.
That's how he was able to prove his point.
Mm-hmm.
So even though yes, it's very graphic, and I would not recommend this to children. Definitely not. But the principal point in all this is just the fact that we have to change the way that we do education.
Mm-hmm.
It can't just be a situation where we're just doing our traditional math, reading, science, social studies, which all have their place in the landscape. But we have to focus on getting kids prepared for careers, because guess what? Certain careers do not require you to be geniuses in math.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a reason why we have vocational schools. There's a reason why we have magnet schools that specialize in specific areas. We need more of that. I'll even go as far as saying students should be able to come into high school with a major. Just like when we go to college, we have to choose a major of study. That process should start 4 years earlier, so that by the time they're done with high school, they already have a professional credential, which they can use to go right into the workforce, or they can continue on to, higher education and already have maybe 30 or 40 credits under their belt because they took the courses in high school.
Right.
So they're not going to be in school for 4 or 5 years, which is the average.
Right.
They might be in school for maybe 3 years because guess what? They were able to get a full year in during those 4 years of high school. So I'm thinking, let's start the process earlier. Let's not have kids wait until they get into grade 13
right.
to figure out what they're going to do for their careers, because that's what happened with me. I had no idea what I was doing. And I was an honor student in high school. Perennial honor student. I get to Temple University and I just chose math because I was good at math. I didn't choose it with the intention of becoming a mathematician and breaking theorems and all this stuff. I did it because I was good at it. It wasn't until after undergrad that I decided I wanted to become a teacher.
Okay.
See, so I'm a late bloomer in that sense. I'm a late bloomer. I didn't come in thinking I'm going to become a teacher. That wasn't my path. That happened a little bit later in my life.
Okay. Well, I'm going to, I know you've got to get on with your day. You've got things to do. So what I'm going to do very quickly, Thank you for joining me for this talk or with this talk, this discussion. I want to have more talks. Um, I met the Black Matician. She and I did a video together, so that's up and running.
Yes, yes.
Very quickly, tell me about some self some self-care methods you know of. We'll wrap it up with self-care methods and what are you most excited about in terms of education and teaching?
Um, I think with self-care methods, I would just say, and I talk about this in the book, like don't wear all the hats. A lot of
Hmm.
us come in trying to wear all the hats because we're so excited about doing this work. We want to be on all the committees. We want to help every kid succeed. We want to call every parent to keep
Hmm.
them informed about their progress. But but the thing is, in the process of doing that, you're exerting yourself mentally
Hmm.
and physically. That's something that we need to do more of as far
Hmm.
as just taking care of ourselves as teachers. And as far as what I'm excited about, I think COVID-19 has got me excited in the sense that it's starting to allow teachers to teach the way they want to teach,
Okay.
especially in this virtual space. I've seen a lot of innovation and creativity in this space,
Oh yeah.
and teachers are starting
You
to
have
thrive.
to.
I mean, in ways that they would not be able to do it in the physical space of a classroom. They're
Hmm.
now given the license to do what they've always wanted to do for years. And
Hmm.
it's all because of this pandemic. So I'm hopeful because of that. Now,
Okay.
obviously, you hate for it to happen in the midst of a pandemic that has taken so many lives and
Hmm.
endangered others. But on the flip side, you like the fact that teachers are now feeling more empowered to speak up and to
Hmm.
say, this is what we've been saying for years about our system. What we've been doing educationally, it just hasn't been working for our students.
Hmm.
Let's try a different way. Let's try these other apps. Let's try something else that's going to really bring that spark back into education. So I'm excited about it.
Okay, good. So we will wrap up here the next time we talk, and it
Yes.
will be the next time. I definitely want to talk about edupreneurship, which blew my mind, and
Yes.
James Baldwin. And we'll talk about this. I read this right before I read yours, A Coddling of the American Mind. So
Mm-hmm.
this is a mind blower too. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining me. Thank you. I seen somebody keeps the door keeps popping open. Somebody keeps peeping in. So so I will let you get on with your day. Enjoy the baby. How old's your baby?
He's gonna be 3 in November.
Oh, okay, he's going to be a
He's
big boy.
big. He's
Okay, so he's
big.
in. I'm
Yeah.
sure he's everywhere and crawling. So enjoy him. Enjoy your family. Stay healthy. Keep those hands washed. I will talk with you very, very soon. Thank you.
Man, thank you, Anthony.
All
Always a
right.
pleasure to talk to you.